Mercedes, Nicole, Brian and Stephanie Emery, and our Dios. Thank you for the home teams are always a special day and a special time for us, isn't it? Let's give them another round of applause. Yeah. So today marks the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, and he is riding high. It is the culmination, if you will, of his ministry. It's the pinnacle of everything that he's done. And in the preceding weeks that lead up to this day, he becomes more controversial. He becomes more vocal about his teachings, because usually in his teachings, when the crowds start to get a little fussed up, Jesus seems to just disappear. He's not really there. Now he's kind of coming forward more and more. He threw the money changers out of the temple, right? He's raising Lazarus from the dead. He's confronting the establishment. He's calling more and more attention to himself. And then we come to this day. And so every Jew living in this time knows the prophecy about the coming Messiah, about the coming of the Messiah. And in Zechariah chapter 9, we read, "Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion. Shout, daughter of Jerusalem. See, your king comes to you, righteous and having salvation, gentle and riding on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a donkey." So Jesus knows that everybody was raised with this scripture. And so he tells his disciples to go and get him a colt so that he can ride it into Jerusalem. And in Luke 19, they brought it to Jesus, threw their cloaks on the colt and put Jesus on it. And as he went along, people spread their cloaks on the road. And when he came near the place where the road goes down to the Mount of Olives, the whole crowd of disciples began joyfully to praise God in loud voices for the miracles that they had seen. "Blessed is the King who comes in the name of the Lord. Peace in heaven and glory in the highest." And some of the Pharisees in the crowd said, "Teacher, rebuke your disciples. We don't want to call too much attention to ourselves because the Romans might get mad." And Jesus says, "I tell you, if they be quiet, even the stones will cry out." So in other words, there's an event that's happening here that's so big that it can't be stopped. It can't be stopped. And even if the people are silenced, the stones themselves will shout. So this is a dream come true for the people of Israel who have been in bondage and in slavery to the Romans. And you would think that Jesus would be thrilled. He's riding high. He's at the pinnacle of his career. Instead, he cries. Scripture goes on to say, "As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it and said, 'If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes.'" So crying is a strange reaction to someone who is riding high, yet he cries because he sees the bigger picture. He knows that he has a higher purpose to fulfill because his life and his teachings have not been about a material kingdom, that we're going to take over Rome and we're going to take back Jerusalem, which is the material realm. His message is of an inner kingdom, of the expansion of consciousness and love that dwells within. So from this place of riding high, Jesus could have ruled the world. He could have led a revolution, and he could have saved the people from their suffering. He's so clear that he has another purpose to fulfill, and he's so sure of his guidance that he does none of these things. Not only does he follow his guidance and go against the world, but he does it publicly. Following guidance is an act of courage, particularly when those around you, your family, your friends, your community, see things differently, right? We need strength. And this is one of the key lessons of this day, that Jesus had the courage and the strength to go public and go against the crowd. So have you ever felt alone in your opinions? Nobody in this room, I don't think, right? No way. Have you ever taken an action that seemed totally crazy to your friends and your family? I grew up with my mother saying frequently, "What are you, nuts?" You know, "Mom, I want to travel to Africa." "What are you, nuts?" "But I want to go live in a yoga ashram." "What are you, nuts?" You know, so often we may hide who we are and what we think because it's not popular, or in the case of Jesus, it's not even safe. So whether you have in your life come out to your family, or you've disagreed with them politically, or you just wanted a different life for yourself that didn't fit the norm, these are the ways that we have gone public in our own lives and gone against the grain, gone against the crowd, right? Last week I talked about Lazarus, raising Lazarus from the dead, and how it can represent losing parts of ourselves that can always be reclaimed and always be regained. A woman by the name of Stephanie Zamora, she's a grand old age of 21, but she says, "I was 21 years old and I had everything I thought I ever wanted. Having just graduated from college at the top of my class, I had an amazing job at a local graphic design firm. I had a brand new townhouse, a boyfriend of almost 7 years, and a shiny little car in my own name." Pretty good for 21, huh? Pretty good for 35 or 50 or 60. And yet she found herself miserable, absolutely miserable. And everyone, the crowd, is like, "Wow, you got everything. You've got it all. You've got the boyfriend, the townhouse, the car." And yet something inside of her was empty. She had, if you will, achieved the outer kingdom, but the inner kingdom was missing. So she decided she needed to make some changes. So like many of us, she decided, "I know, I'll get another job, and I'll be even busier, and I'll do these things and that things." And that just kind of led down another rabbit hole until she stopped and really let herself be and ask herself questions about, who am I, and what is it what is my inner kingdom, and how can it express in the outer? I don't know how many of you remember the movie Pleasantville. It's one of my favorite movies, but there's a scene in there at the end of the film where the single mother of 2 teenagers is crying because life just isn't working out, and she says to her son, "You know, life isn't supposed to be this way." And he says, "It isn't supposed to be anyway." And she said, "You know, I used to have it all. I had the perfect car, I had the perfect house, I had the perfect family." And he says, "There is no perfect house, and there is no perfect car, and there is no perfect family. There only is what is, which is our expression of our individual Christ selves at any moment." Juliana Brine said that when we find ourselves living lives that don't align with who we are, we suffer psychologically. Research suggests that authentic self-expression is a vital component of well-being, even when it sets us apart from others. And that's what we're going to hear on Friday night from Muskin. That's the message of living your authentic self. Another man named Louis B. Ortiz. I have a confession, I watch reality shows. So on $1 Million Listing in New York, this guy is doing $20 million, $25 million deals for townhouses, and he is at the top of his game. His name is Louis Ortiz. The top of his game. I mean, again, he's riding high. Hosanna in the highest. I got everything. I got the penthouse. I have it all. And he's at an open house with other realtors showing off a penthouse, and he meets an older woman, and he says, "So how long have you been doing this?" And she says, "Oh, I don't know, 20, 25 years maybe." And he starts to cry. And later he's thinking, "I don't know what's wrong with me, but every time I think about doing what I'm doing 20, 30 years from now, so again, what's happening is the crowd, the outer world, the outer kingdom, he has it all, but inside it's not matching up." And he says, I don't know what he said. Here it is. because he quit everything. He quit the reality show. He quit everything. He just quit it all, and he's riding high, and he goes, it was tough because, first of all, I didn't know that was what I needed to do. I always ignored that could be a possibility because I'm at the peak of my game. I'm doing better today than I have ever done. However, the inner kingdom is more important. So have you ever had to walk away from something? Have you ever had to walk away from a relationship or a job or a place where you live because you just didn't fit there anymore? And even though the crowd, the family, the friends are like, hey, what are you doing? What are you, nuts? You still need to walk away from that. Henry David Thoreau said it this way, that if a man does not keep pace with his companions, perhaps it's because he hears a different drummer. Let him step to the music which he hears, however measured and far away. Ellen DeGeneres heard the beat of a different drummer when she was riding high in her career. You know, we forget what it was like 20 years ago. But Ellen DeGeneres had a TV show called Ellen, and she had been a comedian for 2 decades already. People loved her, people liked her, and yet she wasn't being totally authentic about who she was. So she went to the writers and she said, I want my character on the show to come out as gay. And so they talked about all the things that could happen. Would they lose their advertisers? Would they lose their audience? And they went ahead and did it anyway. And they did lose some advertisers. They did. In fact, she lost her career. You know, she's riding high. She's riding into Jerusalem. Everything is working for her 100%. But she cries. I don't know if she literally cries, but she's having that same moment as Jesus where she's looking out at everything and it's not working. And it seems archaic now, but apparently when the show would start, they would say, you know, this is adult content, not recommended for children, you know, that they had to put a disclaimer on it. And she said, you know, I never wanted to be a lesbian actress. I never wanted to be the spokesperson for the gay community, ever. I did it for my own truth. That she had to speak her own truth. And afterwards, because she did lose so much, she said, I really thought that people would be more embracing and more welcoming when I did what I did because they had time to get to know me. And I learned a big lesson, and that is that things don't change overnight. Now, we know that, yes, we're 20 years down the road here. It's 20 years later. She's got an even more successful show. She's even more funny. She's even happier than she was before. But she had to let go of that initial riding high, yes, to be her authentic self, to have the inner kingdom match the outer kingdom, because in the outer kingdom in which she was living, it wasn't working. In 2016, she received the Medal of Freedom from Obama in the White House. And it was just such an inspiring experience because, you know, they were saying that because of what she did, it encouraged people's uncles and brothers and sisters and cousins and people to all step forward and to change people's minds, one person at a time, one family at a time, until it spreads and then laws change and reflect that. So it's a huge thing. And so the riding high takes on a whole other level, doesn't it? Just like Jesus' life, you know, he gives it over, but it's for something higher and something more amazing. So when we follow our own path, we have to face the consequences of our actions, right? When Ellen, you know, came out on her show, she had to face that the show got canceled, that things went wrong. Sometimes the path of least resistance would be just to not say anything and kind of go along with things, right? The path of least resistance for Jesus would have been, hey, maybe I'll just go along with the crowd here and we'll just take over. You know, we'll just take over the whole thing. The path of least resistance would have been for Ellen to keep riding the wave that she was riding. But there was something better and something unexpected that needed to emerge. And again, when we do that, it takes strength and it takes focus. And I know that we have created a sanctuary here of safety and peace, and we need to bring the world in as well. And so as we know, this week we have become engaged in Syria. And I don't pretend to understand the complexities of what is happening there. There's an HBO special documentary called Cries for Syria. How many of you have seen it? Not many. It's not easy to watch. It's very difficult to watch. But I think that when we become faced with these things, the best things that we can do for ourselves is educate ourselves, right? Is to understand what in the world is going on here. How did this happen? And where is this suffering? And so, when we launched missiles, I felt like, how many felt like it was deja vu? It's like, whoa, I've seen this before. We're doing this again. And Margaret Sullivan, she's a media columnist, said that Brian Williams on NBC seemed mesmerized by the images of the strikes. He used the word beautiful 3 times and alluded to a Leonard Cohen lyric, "I am guided by the beauty of our weapons," without apparent irony. And so we know that the gassing is horrific. It's horrible. And this is not the first time it's happened. It's happened 3 or 4 or 5 times. And how many people have died? And the Cries for Syria documentary is filmed from the perspective of the children who are speaking and the people who live there, the freedom fighters. What I know for sure is that this suffering that's taking place here can't be contained anymore in the Middle East or in Syria or wherever it is, because if we are one, as we believe, right, that we are all one in spirit, that the Spirit of God is within everyone, then their suffering's our suffering. And as the country, we're riding high. We're in the United States, right? I mean, we're not perfect, but when you look around, boy, we've got it. And so what is our choice? Is our choice an outer kingdom or is it an inner kingdom? And again, because we're such individuals, what is that inner kingdom that is expressing through you and guiding you? I have no answers. I have questions. And I urge you to support refugees. And again, to educate yourself about what is the next path. So the move was made because of empathy, of what we had witnessed. But there's no mention of the refugee ban that is keeping those same people that we care about out of our country, or Islamophobia that seems to be taking over. We need to hold these opposing views all together, because groupthink, as Sullivan said, and a lack of proper skepticism is something that we've seen so many times before as we end up on the brink of a war. And so we want to do good. We want to change things for the better. And yet in our own missiles, 15 civilians died, including 4 children. So how do we, again, it's so complicated and it's so mixed together, but I felt like if I didn't bring it up, at least in this sacred space, for awareness, for healing, for consciousness, that I would be going with the crowd, right? So do we choose an outer kingdom, or do we listen to the inner voice? Remember what Jesus said as he approached Jerusalem. He said, if you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. May we not live that? And perhaps another way to approach all of this is, what would Jesus do? What would Jesus do? How would Jesus approach this? And it's a great way to have a discussion and put this on our head. So, when have you in your own life followed your own path and not gone with the crowd? Whether your crowd be your family or your friends or your community or the larger world, when have you stepped out and said, you know what? You all might think I'm nuts, but I'm going to step out and do this. The world needs your authentic voice. It needs that expression of God to come through you in love in a way that perhaps has never come before. And you may be called, like Jesus on Palm Sunday, to do it publicly. He comes out more and more on this day. Following inner guidance takes courage, it takes strength. And yet, as we do it, we ride high. And we may be lost there for a while. I mean, look at the week Jesus has coming up, right? I mean, he's going to get betrayed and crucified, but then he rises again. So there's this up and down, this pattern, this cyclical thing that's happening throughout the world. And we are the minds and the hearts that can evoke change. Thank you.